Take two.
Go for it. Take two.
Right. This is my second time being live, so maybe it'll be a little smoother. Welcome, everyone. If you haven't been here before, if you weren't here last week, my name's Chris DeMeo. I'm a leader with the club. Since we can't obviously go all ride together, we've decided to kind of get together and do a little bit of an online seminar about some different biking skills that you can do by yourself to kind of prepare for that inevitable day when we do get to go back outside and ride together. Hopefully everyone is healthy and happy and trying to stay somewhat busy and occupied in this challenging time. With that being said, let's jump right into what tonight's topic is, which is bike cleaning. So tonight my goal is to go over some basics about bike cleaning and basically hit kind of the big spots. We're going to go over the bike from basically the front of the bike to the back of the bike, and we'll start with the simple stuff, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the drivetrain cleaning and how to take your chain off and such like that. Most of these things are pretty universal. Some of them are not. If it's something that's a little specific, I'll point it out. That way you're not looking, a little confused when you can't find it on your bike. But most of the stuff we're going to do is pretty straightforward. All right, so we'll start with, like I said, we'll start from the front to the back. So obviously this bike's a little dirty. I haven't cleaned it since the last time we went out. But what we're going to start with, obviously, is just a nice clean down of the frame. So the frame, wheels, rims, all that good stuff. So let's start from the beginning. I'm going to start by showing you some of the tools that I'm going to use. We're a little challenged here in New York City. We don't have the luxury that a lot of people have of having a nice backyard with a hose and a place to do all that stuff. So I'm here on the courtyard of my building, and I don't have a hose to clean the bike. So what I did was went on Amazon, and I got a plant sprayer. This is just a little, it's got a pump on the top. You fill it with water, and you can pump up some air in there. And then it's got a little nozzle. So if you can see, I get a nice stream of water coming out there. So it does pretty much the best I can do without a hose. So the first thing we're going to do with this, I fill this just with clean water. There's no soap or anything in here. And first thing I like to do is just kind of go over the whole bike. And if you notice, I'm not really aiming into any of these movable pieces too strongly with the jet of water. I really don't want to slam these bearings with too much water. Because what will happen is eventually it can work its way up inside there. And then you can really kind of work out the grease, and it'll start to get tight and start getting rusty. So you really want to keep the pressure of the water away from any, especially your hub bearings here on the wheels, your headset bearings, top and bottom. You really don't want to shoot directly into any of these cracks, especially your bottom bracket. Again, anything that's moving, that moves smoothly and has some oil or grease in there, we don't really need to get inside there and clean. That's a different level job. That's something for the bike shop or for more advanced mechanics. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of go over, get everything nice and wet. Nice distance away. If you notice, there's not a whole lot of pressure on the stream of water. That's okay. All we're doing is really wetting everything. So we'll just start with the side that I'm on right now. We don't have to do both sides at once. Wheels, all the dirt, especially anywhere there's some mud or crusted on stuff. So we have a couple options now of what we can do. I have a brush, and you can use pretty much any brush you buy, like a scrubby brush or a floor scrubbing brush, as long as it's not, you don't want metal, obviously, and ruin your paint. Anything that's not too abrasive. And basically, we're just going to go and we're going to knock off any of that heavy built-up mud and dirt that's stuck on our wheels and our frame. Getting in all these inside crooks and crevices here. Underneath, where mud splashes up underneath the bottom bracket here. Don't worry so much about the chain yet. We're going to get that in a separate step. Basically, all we're doing on this step is just trying to really break up and loosen up all that built up dirt and mud and stuff that's on there. You can see some of it's coming off. I don't know how well you can see it on the picture, but you'll have to take my word for it. It is getting a little cleaner. All right, so that's my first step that I do. And just to get everything clean, I try to go from the most dirty to the most superficial stuff to the most detailed stuff. So with that being said, sometimes we might have to go a little deeper. We might have some oil or grease on our rims or on the frame, or maybe it's here on the back from where it rolled off the chain. I have another little squirt bottle. All this has is dish soap and water in it. And basically, I'm just going to go over kind of some of the areas that I might think have some grease on them. So let's just say right here, we've got some grease here. Now, what I'll do then is I'll just go ahead and just rub it like you're cleaning your car. If you have a car or anything else that has grease on it. Dish soap is really good to get off grease, and it's not too harsh to damage the paint or any of the rubber on the bike. So you can feel kind of comfortable using that. It's not a harsh abrasive. It's not a really big solvent. You really want to stay away from using any like harsh solvents or anything like that in the bike, because there's a lot of rubber pieces and a lot of the paint, and you can damage a lot of the stuff on the bike and make it look less pretty. So that's, you know, some bigger areas you can touch are kind of around the rim here where there may be grease or dirt. And basically all you're trying to do is keep that dirt off so it doesn't work its way into the more delicate parts of the bike. All right.
So it's interesting. Maybe you could just comment a little bit about the gloves. Did you say anything about the gloves that you're wearing? And
no, I'm just wearing these to keep my hands clean, really. Yeah, these are just regular.
But also, you haven't started or used a brush. So this whole concept of plain water and soap is keep it simple, right? Because these things can damage the bike. Too much brush, too much.
Yeah, that's right. It's like anything else. You know, you don't want to go on the, you know, if your floors are dirty, you don't really want to go on them with a Brillo pad because they'll take the dirt off, but they'll take everything else off as well. So less is more, especially when it comes to the finish on the bike, because let's face it, we're all really proud of our bikes, and we don't want anything to, you know, we want them to look the best they can. With that being said, there are a few things to keep in mind on some specific different kinds of bikes. If you have a bike with disc brakes like this one has, you really, really, really want to strive not to get too much soap, or especially when you go later and we start greasing and oiling everything back up, you really want to make sure you keep these rotors as clean and untouched as possible. If they're dirty and if they start squeaking, what happens is if you get solvent or grease or soap on these rotors, what will happen is when you go to stop, you'll get this awful squeaking sound that's just terrible. It won't damage the brake rotors, but what happens too is these brake pads that are in here that actually squeeze against the brakes, they're real susceptible to gathering a lot of oil. And they'll attract the oil, they'll absorb it, and what will happen then is they'll just always squeak from that point on, forever and ever and ever. So if your brakes are dirty, the best thing you can do is get an alcohol wipe or some rubbing alcohol on a clean cloth, and you can go over the brake rotors, just the shiny part of the circle. You can really rub that down with some rubbing alcohol or an alcohol pad, and that'll take off any grease or dirt or anything that's been on them. Most of the time they stay real clean because they're always being rubbed by the rotors, so any dirt or anything that gets on there is going to get off right away. But just keep that in mind when you're greasing and moving the bike, especially when you're touching them with your hands that are dirty. You'll leave the oils on them, and it's just a real nasty sound, and nobody likes it. So that's one thing I can say, just one area to really be careful of. If you have a bike that does not have disc brakes and has regular rim brakes, what you really want to do is you want to make sure you get that brake channel, the part that's on the rim here where the brakes squeeze. You want to make sure you get that nice and clean. And you can do that with a scrub. You can do that with the brush. But what I recommend doing is just I have a bunch of old face cloths. I went to Home Depot and I bought a bunch of old chalk cloths. I wash them in their own load after I use them. These are brand new because I figured for you guys to pull out all the stops and get all the good stuff going.
Hey, we have a question for you, Chris. Can you?
I'm sorry, I can't see the screen. So if you have a question, just yell them out.
Yeah. Can you please point out the area on the bike that you would use alcohol?
Sorry, you broke up.
The question was,
can
you point out the area on the bike where you would use alcohol?
Yes. I'm gonna turn this a little bit so you can see the wheel better, just to make sure you're actually in the picture. Yeah. So on these brake rotors right here, This is on disc brakes. So this shiny part here, this circle that the brake actually grabs onto, this is the part here that you'd want to clean with the alcohol to make sure it's nice and fresh and clean. All right. So again, you don't want to try not to use any soap or solvents or cleaners on this. It just leaves a residue and it's going to make that squeakiness. Doesn't it? Your bike will still stop, but you're going to be battling that squeakiness forever. So it's one of the downfalls to having disc brakes. One of the few. Okay, so sorry, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so if you have rim brakes, like regular style bike brakes that grab onto the rim, what you want to do is you want to take some soap and water on a cloth and make sure that you get those rims nice and clean. Because what will happen is, especially if you've gone through some dirty weather or rainy weather or muddiness, what will happen is that area has a bunch of little grooves in it that help the brake pads grab on. Those will just get clogged up with dirt and grease. And then you notice, I'm sure you've all heard it, after you've gone through a puddle or some wet weather, you get that kind of gritty feeling. It kind of sounds like it's sandpaper on there. So what that's going to do eventually is just prematurely wear out either your rims or the brake pads, both of which just cost you money at the end of the day. So a nice way to make sure that that's clean is just go over and really kind of go, and you can go along with the direction of the rim because the lines are etched in this way. So you're actually going to help cleaning them out. And you can see you get a bunch of stuff off there. So that's one important thing. And you're going to do both sides of both wheels. So that's a good thing to remember to do because it'll really improve your braking if you have rim brakes. And it'll also prolong the life of all those parts on the bike. Save you some money and some time and get you out on the road more and in the shop less. So that's that. The other thing you can do with a lot of people kind of miss is try to get the inside of these rims cleaned up in here. It's more of an aesthetic thing of anything, but anywhere that there's not dirt is a place that there's less dirt likely to work into another place on the bike. All right, so you can reach in here, you can use a long piece of cloth if you want to kind of go back and forth with it. I just try to reach in through the spokes. You'll see sometimes some of the more traditional cyclists will have a leather strap or a rubber strap or a tire, or even a zip tie that's on here loosely that just kind of rotates inside the wheel. That kind of works its way to keep that clean. You'll see that on a lot of older touring bikes. This kind of does the job as you ride. That's one thing. So, okay, so that's that. And the other thing you want to do is just make sure that while you're looking at this, just take a quick look. Make sure everything that's on the bike, all these little screws and nubbins and all these other little pieces, now's the chance, just put your hands on all of them and make sure they're all still tight. I know that's not technically cleaning, but you're here anyways. So now's a good opportunity to just kind of feel everything on the bike and make sure it's still tight and proper and not loose.
So another quick question for you, clarification. Yeah. Using soap on the rims is not an issue for rim brakes with regard to residue and noise?
No, because you're going to wash it off anyways. I mean, I wouldn't put the soap on directly. You want to use a soapy water mix, and then afterwards you're going to spray it off with some clean water. They're made of rim brake pads are made of hard rubber compound. Whereas these are like almost like your brake pads for a car. They're like a pressed compound. They're made of completely different things. So the rim brake pads for your rim brakes, they don't absorb stuff. They're rubber. They don't absorb anything hardly at all, unless it's a heavy oil or something like that. But that's not what we're using here. So you don't really have to worry about that. They may squeak for a couple minutes after because they're wet, but that's because you're going to rinse it off. I wouldn't leave the soap on there at the end. You definitely want to rinse off any soap that you use. But I've never had an issue with it. So the other thing that you want to do, okay, so we've done that. We've kind of given ourselves the quick once over on the frame. Feel free also, don't forget about your grip tape. That's our contact point with the bike, and we all, sometimes we'd like to pretend that we're all such in shape that we never sweat, but it never happens. So This is, it's kind of gross, but the rim tape does get soaked with sweat after a while, especially if you're riding hard. So don't be shy to get that, scrub that down a little bit. We've all seen the people with white rim with white handlebar tape, and it does get dirty. So don't think that your black doesn't get dirty. You just can't see it. So, so you can clean that off as well. It'll give you a nice, especially if you have the rubber, this sticky rubber like the lizard skins or lizard grips. It'll really refresh that tackiness of that rubber. So you can try that. Just use soap and water on those. Please don't use any solvents or oil or any sort of a wax compound to make it shiny again. All that's going to do is make it super slippery, and you're going to fall off them. That's not what we want. We want our hands to be sturdy on there. So don't make it the shiniest stuff in the neighborhood, or else you're going to have a bad day. Okay, so that said, we've done that. We've gone from the front. Now we're going to move to the center of the bike here. We'll start at the top with our seat. Okay, this is a fabric over rubber seat. So again, I'll use my soap and water. I'll get this thing nice and clean because it is a point of contact on the bike, and it's just going to keep your clothes a lot cleaner. So eventually, especially if this sits around for a while all winter, you're going to get some dust on here. You're going to put your nice clothes on. Maybe you're running to the store or something like that, or even anything but black pants. You're going to start to see some marks after a while. So like anything else, just give it a quick scrub. Get underneath the seat as well. Very important because all the dirt from the back wheel kicks up and hits underneath the seat here. So especially if you don't have, this is rubber, so it's not such a big deal, but especially if you have a seat that has fabric or some foam in there, you want to make sure you get that clean because that's all it's doing is picking up all that dirt. So that's that. Okay, what we're going to do since we're here, check our seat post. Make sure it's nice and tight. Part of our 2-minute bike check. While we're here, we got it here. Let's check it. It is great. So now we're going to move down. We've done the frame already. So now the next thing, I think what we'll start on is again, the back rim, we're going to do the same as we did the front rim. If you have disc brakes, same caveats. If you have rim brakes, same cleaning method. Wheels are the same as far as cleaning goes. The back one, you'll notice, will probably get a little dirtier because of the grease and oil from your chain. It tends to just, especially if you just oiled your chain, you didn't get all the oil off, it's going to start centrifugal force will put some of that up. So pay attention to make sure you get all this area nice and clean. You can clean your wheels too, your tires as well. If you want to scrub those down, especially if you have the lighter sidewalls, it'll make them look really nice. Also, by cleaning the tires, you can dislodge any little bits of glass or sharp stuff that might be stuck to that. It's just a good practice to do. I would recommend not using my hands, only because said little pieces of glass and stuff get stuck in there. That's not how you really want to find that. So use a cloth or use a brush, and you can just get those. Don't use the same brush you've used on your greasy chain, but you can use a separate brush for the body of the bike and the wheels. But just go once over, just like you would something nice that you have that you want to keep in good working order. So with that being said, I think the next thing we'll do is we'll start tackling this drivetrain. All right. There's a couple ways we can do the drivetrain. We can do a quick chain cleaning. If we have a chain cleaning tool, which Park Tool makes one, a couple other brands I'm sure make them as well. This is like kind of a cheap tool. It's really nice, works really well. It's about $25, I think, at the bike store, give or take. What this is basically, it got a bunch of gears and cogs, and I'll show you the insides. What you do is you take the top off, and I don't know if you can see inside, there's a bunch of gears and levers and a whole bunch of stuff in here. And what you do is you fill this up with a solvent cleaner. I should say a solvent. I said not to do that. It's basically like a degreaser. Like what I use is I use an organic degreaser. It's basically a kitchen cleaner. It's called Orange Peel or Orange Crush. You can buy it in the grocery store. And what it is basically to clean your kitchen surfaces. It's just a degreaser. It uses orange citrus to take the grease off. It's biodegradable. It's organic. You don't have to worry about it making a mess outside. The other thing you can use is something we all have already that's a good degreaser, and that is dish soap. Dish soap is excellent degreaser, as we know, because it gets our greasy dishes clean. It's also pretty safe to use. We use it on our dishes, so we don't have to worry too much about it being too poisonous or dangerous for the environment. So what you can do is, what I like to do is I'll fill this up to the line. I'm going to just go over the basics of how to use this real quick. We're not going to focus on this guy because probably not a lot of people have these. So we're not going to waste our time saying this is the only way to do this. This is by far probably the quickest and easiest way to do a light cleaning on the chain. So what you do is you take this top off, fill up, there's a line here, you fill up to the line with the cleaner. And then what you do is you put it on the chain, and there's a little picture on here to show you which way it goes. You put the top back on. It's got two little clips to hold everything together. And then basically, you just rotate it backwards for about 30 rotations. And what it does is it gets that chain nice and clean, and it kind of lets all these little bristles and stuff work into all that chain. That's going to get all that superficial stuff off there. Again, it's not perfect. It won't work on a deadly, dirty chain, but it definitely is. After every couple rides, throw that on there. It'll really extend the time until you have to do a full cleaning, unless you've gone through some real funky places. But now let's move on from there, and let's say we did go through some funky places, because this bike has been some crazy places, and I haven't really cleaned the chain since then. So this is going to be a perfect opportunity. So for this full cleaning of the chain, we're going to need a couple different things that you can get around the house. A Tupperware container that's big enough to kind of fit the chain in once we take it off the bike. And again, some of our handy dish soap and water.
So quick question for you on the last thing you just did. Where do you usually dump the greasy stuff once the chain is clean?
So what I usually do is I usually take it and I'll throw it into a bag, like a double plastic bag, and I just throw it in my trash. That's the best way I have to get rid of it. I don't like to throw it down the drain, because especially if it's your drain at home, that's just going to clog up that drain eventually. And it is kind of nasty stuff. I don't like to throw it down the drain, because it's just full of dirt and gunk and grit and all that stuff from the road outside. All you're doing is just inviting your drain to get clogged up. So what I do is I'll throw it, or if I have an empty soda bottle or something like that, I'll throw it in the soda bottle. I'll put the cap on, I'll throw it in the trash, and just go from there. It's not the ideal solution, but I think it's the safest for your plumbing. So, because when you see this water that's going to come out of here at the end, it's pretty dirty.
So another question and follow-up to that, how do you feel about taking it outside and dumping it down a sewer grate? There's a couple mindsets there. I'll give you both. All that stuff did come from outside, right? So obviously this dirt didn't come from nowhere. It came from the road outside. It came picked up off the ground. Realistically, that's where it's going to end up if it rains and goes down a storm drain. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, do I want to throw it down a storm drain? I feel a little guilty about that. I don't know that throwing in the trash is any better as far as for the environment, but it's less of a direct line right to the river or the ocean. So I guess it's 6 and 1/2 dozen in the other. I'm not sure what the right answer is or what the most ecological answer is, but I feel like dumping it down a storm drain it's just a little direct. At least the way that I'm doing it, it has to get processed with the trash a little bit. And like I said, I'm not an expert on the waste removal in New York City, so I'm not sure what happens to it once it goes in the trash. But I'd like to think that at least it gets sorted a little bit with all that stuff. So that's your two mindsets on that. Okay, so now to take the chain off the bike, I'm going to go through the most common way to do it. Now, there are 2 or 3 different methods of how the chains are held on. This chain happens to have a quick link. which is a special link in the chain that holds it together, but you gotta do it without any tools, supposedly. Usually, after it's been on there a while, you're gonna need a pair of pliers or something to get it off because it does get a little tight. So the trick is to find that quick link first. So it's hard to see on the camera, but I would invite you to look online and look at a quick link. They're in there. They're online all over. You type in quick link in Google, you can see it. And if you look on your chain, you're going to notice if you have a quick link, one of the links looks way different. The holes are going to be a little more oval, and it's going to look totally different than the rest of the links on the bike. So once I take it off, I'll bring it over and I'll put it in front of the camera so we can see what it looks like. To get that quick link off, what we're going to do is we're going to push it towards each other. So instead of pulling on it, we're going to push it together. And let's see if it cooperates. If it doesn't, we're going to get the pliers out. Because once they're on there a little while, they do get a little bit tight.
So while you're doing that, there's a question. Would this be a good time to check the chain for stretch?
Yes. Yeah, you can check that. So to check the chain for stretch, the best way to do that is with the chain stretch tool. You can also do it by measuring the chain. There are some different formulas out there. I'm not exactly sure of them off the top of my head. And I don't own a chain stretch tool. I hardly ever check my chain for stretch. I shouldn't say that. A nice kind of like quick way to do it is if you take your chain when it's on the biggest ring that you have on the front, you can pull the chain, try to pull it off the front of the sprocket, okay? And I guess the rule of thumb is if you can get it so you can see the points of the teeth, if you can pull it enough that you can see the points of the teeth, then your chain needs to be replaced. If you can pull it here and you just get a little bit of air between, but you can't see the actual points on the sprocket, then you should be good to go. And that's just a rule of thumb. It's just a really rough way to do it. It's not scientific, but it'll give you a good estimation of how close you are. I prefer to I change my chain every 6 or 8 months as a rule. I don't want this thing breaking when I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I do a lot of bike camping. I do a lot of trips on my bike. The last thing I need to do is be fiddling with this on some country road somewhere. It just takes a lot of the fun out of riding. And
So,
yeah.
Sorry, finish up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I would say B, it could really kind of like just put a damper on your day if you don't have a way to get to a bike shop.
So a little bit of a sidebar. One was a comment from Steve that I want to make sure everyone sees in the group chat that oil wrecks the sewage treatment plants for processing waste, so don't pour down the sewer. And then Gina was asking if anybody knows of a bike shop that collects bike grease. Some have left a pan outside to dry, then wipe and dispose in trash. If you do know of any bike shops that do that kind of thing, maybe let Gina know through the group chat.
Yeah, sure.
And then there's on the topic that you're on, there's another question. Is there a rule of thumb regarding mileage for chain stretch?
I don't know. That's a good question. I am not sure.
Okay.
I can look that up. I'm not sure. I'm going to show you this quick link. I'm going to put it back together so you can see what it looks like when it's on the bike. So let me see if I can see what this is. Okay, so this is the quick link. As you can see, it's got a real big oval on one side. It looks totally different. This piece right here, this on both sides look the same. And what happens is of course it's not going to come apart now. What happens is it holds. It's a little bit tricky to show on a webcast, but let me just get this loosened up so I can do it by hand. So in order to take this off, what you want to do is you want to push the chain together. Oops, sorry, lost the camera there. And what you're going to do is it's going to slide open like this. And then what will happen is it will pull apart into 2 pieces. So this piece holds the front of the chain, This piece holds the back of the chain, and then they both fit in together, and that's what holds the whole chain together. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in this, look it up on YouTube or Google. There's some excellent videos that do this so much better than I could ever do in this. Unfortunately, it's not something that's real conducive to kind of showing you while I'm trying to hold the iPad up here.
I think you were able to get the gist of it across. I think people could sort of see, and they have to try it on their own chain if they're inclined, right?
They're going to be a little tight, so you'll probably they do sell a special pair of pliers at the bike shop that takes these off in a jiffy. It fits right in there and it pops it right off. So the quick link pliers, they're called. I don't have a pair. I just use a regular pair of pliers, a needle nose pliers, and they fit in between and put them. But I would highly recommend if it's something you want to invest in. They're not too expensive, and it does make the job a whole lot easier. So something to do. So now we have the chain apart. Okay. So what I should have done already, and what I'll do afterwards, is you want to have your derailleur on the lowest, the smallest cog in the back. It just makes it easier to put back on afterwards because we know exactly which one is going on first, and it also gives us the least tension on our derailleur because the chain is obviously the least cogs are taken up, so we have the most chain to play with. All right, so now that we've got this chain off, what we want to do is before we pull it out of the derailleur here, what you want to do is you want to make a mental note of which way it goes over those cogs. Okay, because afterwards when you go to put it back together, you're going to have to match that up again. So, if you look at the chain, it goes under the bottom of the first cog, around the back of it, and then around the front of the second cog. So it's like an S shape. It goes like this around the first one, the top one, and this around the bottom one, and then back out. So, with that being said, we can take it off now. So do that. Just unravel it from here. Take it right off the front. And then we can get it right off the back. So there's our chain. And then the reason I'm wearing gloves is because this thing is nasty and filthy, and my hands would be black if I wasn't having these black gloves on. So, because I'm lazy and I don't want to have to spend 25 minutes to clean my hands afterwards, I just put this pair of gloves. Now that we have the chain off, what I like to do first is take my soapy water mix, put the chain right inside. Put the cover on the Tupperware. All the way. And we just proceed to start shaking the crap out of this chain. And what we're also trying to do is just get that big stuff off. Get all that soapy
What's that solution again? Is that just the soapy water?
Just this soap and water.
Okay.
Yep, just my homemade degreasing solution. So all I'm doing is just really agitating that chain, letting it work in there for a while. And if you want, if it's really bad, you can let it soak for a while. Go watch a TV show, come back, do it some more. It may take 2 or 3 fills of this. So once that's done, now say we've shaken this for about 15 minutes now. All right. Now we're going to open it up. We're going to take a look. And what we should see is it shouldn't be completely clean yet, but it should be nice and starting to work, nice and soaked in. But we should be starting to see the stuff get loose on there. So, once that's all loose, and we've started to work off all that heavy grit that's on there, we can go at it with either our chain brush, which is a different one we use for the frame, or we can go at it with a rag. And we can start working it and getting all that heavy grease off the outside, dirt and gunk from the road. And basically all we're doing is we're just running that chain through either our rag or brushing it off with the brush. Now this will get you dirty, so don't do this in your Sunday best. And don't do it in a place like my living room where I did it last time where your wife could see you do it. So
we have a question. How do you remove the chain without the quick release?
So if there's no quick release on the chain, then what you have to do is get a chain breaker tool and you have to remove one of the pins out of the chain. At that point, that's a little beyond the scope of what we're doing tonight. At that point, I would invite you to take that, because here's the deal: a lot of those pins are not reusable. So you will, you're supposed to have a new pin every time you remove the pin. So I would invite you to either look online for that. I'm not going to go over that tonight, because 99.9% of the chains now on any of the bikes that we'll ride in the club will have a quick release, unless it's an older bike or a specialty bike maybe, or a little bit.
We have a comment that I want to read into the record for the fact that this is being videotaped. There's a suggestion to the group to take a picture of the chain and how it sits on the derailleur before you remove the chain, so that you'll have a reference for how to put it back on the derailleur.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's I'm not yet. I shouldn't say that. I'm old, so like all this new technology is awesome, and I don't think about it until after the fact.
So there's also another question, which is, can you remove, or maybe should you remove the back tire?
You can. In order to clean the chain, you mean, or just to clean the bike? You can remove the back tire if it's easier to work off the bike. By all means, yeah, do it off the bike. I'm about to remove it next when we start to do the cassette. So that's we're gonna get to that point yet, but yes, it does make it much easier to clean that stuff when it's off the bike. And then you can get in all those nooks and crannies of the frame as well without the wheel in the way. So yeah, by all means, you're not gonna hurt anything by taking it off. You just kind of jumped ahead of me a little bit, but that's all right. So we've wiped off the chain, and you can see already. Now I can see it. It's shiny metal again. It's not 100% clean yet, but it's 100% better than it was before. It was all black before from some dirt and gunk from the road. So just that little bit of shaking around in the solution and the running through the rag. I don't know if you can see everything that came off that chain, but it does do a lot of good. So now what I like to do after I do that first preliminary cleaning is I like to throw it back in the water, shake it around a little more, let that kind of work its way through again. And what you're really doing here is you're trying to get all this get all this soapy water inside the chain. And what you want to do is you want to get inside the chain in these little rollers here. You want to try to get all that old oil and junk and dirt and all that stuff that's gotten in there, because that's where all the friction and stuff happens inside the chain. The outside is important to clean, but the inside is the part that causes the wear. So we want to definitely try to clean this as best as we can. Make sure that we've got all as much of that grit and stuff out of the chain as we can get it. So, and a good way to check for that is, I don't know if you can hear, but if you twist the chain from side to side like this, so let me see my camera. If you go from side to side, not the way the chain usually bends, which is around like the wheel, but if you turn it head on and you go side to side like this, if it's dirty, you'll hear all sorts of grittiness in there. It'll sound like there's dirt and grit in there. It'll sound like sandpaper. So the idea is you want to just clean this until you get all that grit and everything out of there. So
a quick pause for a time check. We're at 7:40 FYI, and just a reminder to everybody that next week we're going to be covering tires and flats and how to change the tire and fix and patch your tubes. So we hope you'll join us then. There is also a question. How do you balance sort of when to do your own work and save a few bucks versus supporting local bike shops, especially now? Probably where's the limit of stuff that, you know, you ought to do yourself versus you want to kind of get it done by a pro?
My limit is twofold. One, what do I feel comfortable doing? If I don't feel 100% comfortable that I can put the bike back together the way after I took it apart, I take it to the shop. If I'm not 100% comfortable with the knowledge of what it, if I for a second, for example, bottom bracket, if I look at the bottom bracket, if someone told me, you got to take that bottom bracket apart, and I look at it and I say, I don't know which wrench to use for that.
that right there, that question right there stops me in my tracks. If I don't know which tool to use for it, I'm taking a trip to the bike shop, because the worst thing I can do to my bike is break it. And then it just costs me more. It's always going to cost more to fix a problem that you've compounded than it would to fix the small problem that you tried to fix in the first place but didn't know how. That's a safe bet. The other thing is, to be quite honest with you, how much time I have in my day and how convenient it is for me. If I'm super busy, if I have a packed week and I need my bike for the weekend, but I have meetings Thursday, Friday, I'm taking it to the bike shop. I'm going to let them do it. I'm not too proud to do that, and that way it's helping me and it's helping them. Also, at this time, if you just bored and want to take your bike to the bike shop and have them fix it because they probably don't have a ton of work right now, that's a real good reason to take it as well. You know, you want to keep those guys. Think about it. If we don't help our bike shops now, they're not going to be able to help us when we're all want to go back out there again. It's like the restaurants, you know. I might order food more now than I would before because I want to order it later. And if I don't order it now and I keep these guys in business, that food's not going to be there when everyone's back out. The same with bike shops. Now,
Yeah, I was going to say, someone made a comment that it's always good for a full tune-up, take it to the bike shop. And, you know, what we're teaching you today is probably good. If you know you were out in the rain, you know, you picked up a chunk of dirt, you get to it in the interim and then just maybe seasonally go to the bike shop for a tune-up. And then you're just doing touch-up work in between, right?
yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, too, if at any point in this, you say to yourself, I'm super comfortable cleaning the frame. I'm super comfortable cleaning the wheels. Not so comfortable taking the chain off. By no means let that preclude you from doing the parts of the bike cleaning that you're comfortable with and taking it to the shop to do the other stuff. You know, there's no reason. This is not an all or nothing proposition. You can never feel ashamed to do as much as you feel comfortable with and then send it to the pros. That's what they're there for. So if you got to the point where you took the chain off and you looked at yourself and said, I don't know if that's in my wheelhouse, that's nothing wrong with that. That's what those guys are there for, and they're more than happy to help you. So
I think there's an interesting discussion that Sarit just asked a good question, and so I want to read it into the record. If anybody knows if there are bike shops, some that are busier, since more people are biking as opposed to taking the subway, it could be that they're busy. So I think it's good to have a relationship with a number of bike shops, get to know them, let them get to know yourself, and check in with them at this time. Because if they're running slow, it's a good time to get that work done. And if they're running busy, tell them to call you when they're not so busy and could use the business. You know, spread the love.
yeah, that's right. That's right. And don't forget, they're only there because we support them. So, you know, don't forget about them in this time especially. So okay. So back to the chain. I'm going to make this next part. We'll speed up a little. I didn't realize we'd taken so much time already. Okay. So once we did the soapy water part, we got our chain as clean as we want it. And obviously this is a little bit abridged. It would take a little longer than it's taken tonight. I think you'd want to do this probably 3 or 4 times to get all the grit out of the chain. But for tonight, we have the idea. So after you've got that, this thing's now full of soapy water. Can't have that either. Soap and oil don't mix. So we don't want to leave that soap residue in the chain. So the idea now is I have, again, Megan and my wife met. I stole this from upstairs in my house like 6 months ago, and it got all greasy, so now it's mine. But this is just filled with clean water. So all I do is I take that into clean water, shake it around in there some, get all that soapiness out of there. And if you really want to, if it's really dirty, what you can do is empty it out, get some more clean water, and do another round. So the idea is now this chain is clean and soap-free. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and just slide over here for a second out of frame, get myself a new clean towel. Not the old dirty one that has all the grease that we just took off the chain. And get my new clean towel, and I'm going to try to dry this thing off as much as I can. All right? Just so I can get all that surface grease. And you can see it's still dirty. I didn't clean it enough yet. But for the point of the discussion, you know now the steps to take. I just haven't done it with enough time to get it 100%. So now, once we get this guy clean and dry as we can get it, what I'm going to do is go ahead and put it back on the bike, but not yet. first we're gonna clean the cassette. So since we're running a little short on time, I'm gonna do a little bit of an abridged method for that as well. So we'll remove the wheel off the bike. Now this bike happens to have what we call quick releases. So these, through axles. So they're a little different than a quick release. This takes a wrench to remove the wheel. All right, not that size. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get the right size wrench. But if you have quick releases, everyone should know how to use that and take their wheel off. So I'm going to do the same thing here. This guy out of the way. All right, we've removed the wheel now. In there so we don't lose it. Now, this is the cassette. If anyone is unfamiliar with the terminology I was using, this is basically all your gears on the back wheel. Some are bigger, some are smaller. Irrelevant for the point of the discussion here. They all clean the same way. So, this guy, I'm going to use our handy soap and water mix. And again, making sure that we don't get too much soap on our brake lever. Now, you'll notice I'm using this upside down and also a little straw in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to get that soapy water all over that cassette. Again, not getting it on my disc brake. So once that's cleaned, we're going to use my chain cleaning brush, not the one we use to clean the frame. And we're just going to give that, I don't know if you can see what I'm actually doing, but we're just going to give that a nice cleaning. Get all that dirt off there and the grease off there. Now you'll notice that this cassette, just like when you ride, one direction spins, the other direction locks in place. What we want to go is, we're going to go in the locking way so that we're working against it. And then every now and then we just spin it a little bit further. And all we're doing is we're just going along with the direction of the gears, and we're getting in between them, getting all that gunk out of there. I don't know. Can you see what I'm doing? You can see it right with the camera. All right. And we're just going to just do this until this guy is no longer gunky and dirty. It may take a while. We might have to spray a little more water on there. But we're basically just going to go ahead and make sure we've got that sucker all clean. And once we do, we're going to spray it off with some clean water. Just get all that old grease and dirt off there.
So there are some questions. What about derailleur cleaning? And assuming you should clean the rear rim and tire after cleaning the cassette?
Yes, I would do the rim and tire after the cassette because all you're doing is getting all that nice greasy water all over that again. So yeah, you can save this step until afterwards. But all right, so that is clean, and now we'll get to the derailleur next. I get everyone's right on track there. I love it. It beat me to the punch here. So basically, clean this off. We rinsed it off. We can let that air dry now because what's going to happen is we're going to give it a light coat of oil once we oil the chain. So that's going to get itself nice and oiled again. So I'll step that wheel aside for a second. Now, cleaning the derailleur. The most important thing you can do with the derailleur is make sure that you've got these little jockey wheels clean. What they'll do is, these are these little wheels that are built into the derailleur. What they're going to do is they're just going to attract all sorts of dirt and dust. So you can go ahead with your rag and you can just kind of clean those over. You can spray them down with some water if you want to. I'll let that ambulance go by first, sorry. And basically what you want to do is you just want to take all that big grease and dirt and junk off here. Because if you don't, it's just going to deposit it right back on the clean chain that you just cleaned. So that's not what we want. And then what I like to do for these guys here is if you get, I know I have this big brush, and I don't have it down here with me, but I have an old toothbrush that I saved when it was too old to use in my mouth anymore. And I just use that little toothbrush to get into any of these little nooks and crannies I can't reach with the big brush, or I don't want to because this guy's all dirty from chain and stuff. So you can get all these little nooks and crannies in the derailleur. I try not to spray too much degreaser on the derailleur, only because the cables are in there. There's a lot of moving pivot points on here. It doesn't really need it. If you do need to oil these little points, eventually you can just take some chain oil and put one drop on each one of these little points that moves. Usually they're pretty good. You don't really have to worry about it too much. It's mostly the parts that interact with the chain, or if it gets any dirt on it, you can clean it up with some clean water. And that'll pretty much get that taken care of. So there's our derailleur cleaning. Again, you can go over it and get all that dust and dirt out of all those nooks and crannies. You can go to your heart's content with that. And then when we have the back wheel off, now's a good opportunity to get all these parts of the frame that we couldn't get before. So the inside here, inside the chain stays here. You can get inside on this part of the frame, the back seat tube where you can't really reach when the wheel's on there. All that stuff. And then you can investigate, make sure your brakes are good. Now's a good time to take a look at those, make sure they're not gunked up too much.
And you also clean the cassette with the wheel on?
You can. It's just there's a lot more stuff in the way, so I find it easier to take the wheel off to do that, just because it does tend to give you a little more room to work. So I'm not trying to fight against the seat stays and all that other stuff, and attempt to keep all this stuff a little bit cleaner. You're not throwing all that dirty grease and gunk all over the place. The other thing I did forget to mention is you also do want to clean your front chainring. It will also get gunky and dirty. Same way, you can just use a cloth for that. And you can wipe that down. Just be careful, because sometimes these cogs do get sharp after a while from being on the chain. So just do take care that you don't slice your hand or anything on there, or catch yourself on it. But basically, you just can go around this and get all that dirt and grease off there. You can wipe this down with some soapy water, get that all cleaned up. And then, once that's all set, and mind you, it will take a little longer than it's taken me here, but I am really doing a little bit of an abridged version here tonight so that we can get through every step. I took too long talking like usual. Let's pretend that we did a really good job cleaning that, and that is perfect now. So now, let's go ahead and get everything back together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change my gloves since I put a hole in this pair. Gloves with wet hands. All right. Pretend I put those on and not wasting your time. All right. So now we're ready to put everything back together. So I'm going to do what I should have done in the first place and make sure that my derailleur was all the way down to the lowest gear. It's going to make the next steps a whole lot easier. So first things first, we're going to put our back wheel back in. Get that lined up and in place.
Just a quick reminder to everybody that thank you, Julie, for sharing a link in the group chat that New York City residents, there's information on how to properly dispose of grease at www.nysc.gov/assets/DSNY/site/how to get rid of/grease, GREASE. Thank you very much. I think you're about to do this once you get the chain on, but the question is, what's the best way to lube the chain? I tend to use too much and it gets dirty again very fast. So give us your tips on that, right?
Yep, we'll get right to that. So, okay, so now, remembering that we took a mental note of how this goes in and out from before. We're going to put it back together the same way as it came apart. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put our quick link back in. So I have this terrible habit that I am learning because of COVID to get rid of, which is putting pieces of things in my mouth. to hold them. So I have gone strides not to do this anymore because obviously nowadays that is not a great idea. I almost did it here with this quick. Okay, so all right, so now we put the quick link back together. Now what we do is we line it up, and you give it a quick pull, and it'll snap itself back in place, and that'll hold that guy in place. All right, so now the chain is back on. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we get everything back together the proper way. So we're going to give this a quick test. Yep, it does the gears the way it's supposed to do. It sounds a little funky because I don't have any oil on there yet. Okay, so now the chain is back on. Everything's normal. Everything's working the way it should work. Now we come to the point where we're going to grease the chain again. Oh, I'm sorry, oil the chain again. We have a couple options. Depending on personal preference, what type of terrain you're in, there are two types of lube you can use. Wet lube, wet, it's your traditional style oil. It stays wet when it's on the chain. It's an actual petroleum-based lubricant. It does the whole thing. And it looks just like what you would think it would look like, just oil. There's another kind that's called dry lubricant. Okay, so the dry lubricant, what this is an alcohol-based fluid that has Teflon and other sorts of really slippery compounds in it. And what happens when we put this on the chain is the wet part actually evaporates, and it leaves behind that Teflon, and it leaves behind those particles of really, really slippery product that actually keep the chain lubed up. If you're riding in a lot of dusty, dirty, sandy, anything where your chain can pick up a lot of grit, they recommend to use this dry lubricant. Especially a lot of mountain bikers use it because, let's face it, that's all they go through. Pros and cons. Pros, it doesn't stay wet, so it doesn't pick up the oil. It doesn't pick up the dirt as much that stick to it. Cons, it doesn't last nearly as long, and it doesn't last really in the wet. So if you are riding in a lot of wet conditions, or if it's like springtime and you think you're gonna get caught in the rain, I would use the wet lubricant. So it's easy to remember. Wet is for wetter conditions. It stays on there better. Oil and water don't mix. Dry for dry locations, like sandy, dusty, dirty locations where there's just a lot of grit in the air and it's just gonna pick up on that chain. I prefer to use the wet lubricant. I think it lasts a little longer, and I think it does a little bit better job for my needs. Now, using the wet lubricant, and that's what we're going to go over right now. You want to shake it up, make sure everything's really, really mixed up in there. And then what I like to do is I like to find the quick link right here. So that gives me a good space to start, and I know when I hit that again, so I know I've hit the whole chain. So I don't have to worry about counting the links or trying to figure out where I started. I just look for this one special link that looks different than the rest of them. Now, with the wet lubricant, what I do is I take and I put one drop of lubricant, just a little drop. I don't even squeeze the bottle, I just let it flow out. And I put one drop on each one of these big parts of the chain, each one of these parts that connects. And I just work my way through the whole thing until I make it all the way back to the beginning again. Now, for the interest of time, let's pretend I made it all the way back to the beginning again, because you don't want to see me through a whole 70 link chinks or whatever I have in here, chain links. All right, so now I've done every single link. I've made it back to my quick link. Now, what I do is I run that chain. Just let everything kind of mix in together. Maybe shift a couple times. Get it all worked in. And what this will do also is you're also depositing some of the lubricant on here. If you don't feel like you're getting enough on your cassette, you can wipe it down a little with an oily cloth. I don't think it's necessary. It gets enough from the chain, I believe. And now, the most crucial part to wet lubricant. And this might answer the question that we just had, which was, how do I keep it from getting dirty right after I clean it? Get yourself a clean rag. And what you want to do is you want to dry off the outside of the chain as much as you can. The idea of lubricant on the chain is you want it on the inside. You want it where the pieces move on the inside. The outside of the chain needs a little bit, but the more that's on there, the more dirt it's going to attract. Because that oil is always wet. So it's like dropping.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Couple of questions for you. The first one is, my bike has started squeaking when I pedal. Do you think it needs lube somewhere? It's a new bike, and I don't know how long it was in the shop. So that's the first question.
Yeah. So if you ever hear a squeaking on the bike, it could come from any number of things. Unfortunately, it's going to be hard to diagnose without the bike in front of you. But there's a few places you can check. Obviously, lubing the chain can't hurt. I would definitely go for that first. See if it fixes the problem. If it doesn't, you may want to check your pedals. Spin your pedals around. See if anything's squeaking. More important than that, put a little pressure on them when you squeak them around, when you move them around as if your feet were on them. Try to find where it's coming from. Try to do a little research. And while you're on the bike, if you hear a squeak, see if you stop pedaling, does it still squeak? If it does, chances are the squeak is somewhere in the back wheel, or it's somewhere in the hub here, right? Because you're not moving the pedals at that time, so maybe it's not coming from here anymore. If it only squeaks when you pedal, chances are it is something to do with the drivetrain, but it could be a bottom bracket, it could be your pedals, it could be the chain. That kind of thing is a little bit hard to discern every now and then, but you kind of have to take it in steps like that. So what I would recommend is do a little bit of a different thing every time and see if you still hear the squeak. Isolate one piece at a time and see if it still makes the squeak. Eventually, you're going to isolate one thing, it's going to stop squeaking. You're going to figure out where that squeaking is coming. And if you can't, take it to the shop. They're experts at finding squeaks. It's like the most common question that people come to the bike shop with.
The next question is, can you use wet lube on a rainy day and dry lube on a dry weather day without first having to clean the chain?
You can. Re-lubing a dirty chain is not ideal. Yeah, you can always don't take that the wrong way. If you're on a multi-day trip, if you just went through a rainstorm, yeah, by all means throw some lube on the chain because you're gonna end up with that nice, beautiful orange chain the next day if you don't. But in general, you want to try to keep the same with same. If your chain is already wet lubed before you clean it and start it again, using the dry lube on there is kind of like it's like mixing oil in something else. It's still not going to be ideal. It won't hurt the chain, but you're not going to really get the best benefits of both because it's already wet from the oil. Unless you clean all that oil off, you're not really going to get the benefits of the dry lubricant because you still have oil on the chain. So that's my opinion on it. I think it's not going to hurt anything by any means. You can definitely, if you're at your buddy's house and he only has wet lube and you use dry lube and you lose your chain, well, by all means.
Just a quick time check. We're at 8:05, and it's okay to go a bit longer, but do you want to wrap sort of over?
Yeah, I can wrap it up. I just wanted to say that, to get back to this, the most important thing is to keeping that chain clean is making sure the outside of the chain is as dry as you can get it. With a rag. Obviously, you want a little coat of oil on there. You don't want it to be sopping. You shouldn't be able to see like oil dripping off there when you're finished with it. That's too much. So the idea is to let it on there, soak it in, let it soak for maybe a half hour or so, and then wipe off the outside of the chain. You can even let it soak overnight. It's not going to hurt anything. But the idea is before you go off for that first ride, grab a cloth, give a quick dry off, and rub the outside of the chain because that's going to keep everything a lot cleaner. So, sorry we ran out of time again. Hopefully we got to the most important stuff. I know there's always 1,000 things more that we could do with any one of these webinars, but thank you so much all for sticking with us for an hour, and I hope that you learned something. And if you have any questions that anything we didn't cover, anything that you think that we can do better next time, please send the line down to Alan or just pop a comment on the 5BC Facebook page, and we'll try to address it for next time. We're doing this for you guys, so we're not.
You're getting a lot of thank yous. Really great, and yeah, maybe next time you'll do it without a stand. They're saying it's harder to do it at home without a stand, but it's all good.
But for demonstration purposes, it's so much easier to do with both my hands free.
All right. So reminder, everybody, that we got an exciting Friday night at the movies with Ed Sobin. In the next 3 weekends, he's going to be talking about his trip cross country. We have the Saturday night dance party continuing. And on Monday, we've got Jacqueline Gickow teaching a stretch class for cyclists. And next Wednesday, we'll be doing Tire Patch. Keep an eye out. And thank you all for coming. We had a great turnout, 31 people at peak, and at most stayed till the end. Everyone's clapping. Thank you very much, Chris. You're our hero.
Thank you guys for showing up and making this a thing. You know, I could talk to myself all night, but it's much more fun if I'm actually showing somebody something. So thanks a lot for giving me your time. I really appreciate it.
All right. Good night, everybody. Take care. Stay healthy.